After 12 years together, my husband turned a night out into a late-night rendezvous with his coworker Callan. When I saw flirty messages and songs on their Spotify playlist, I confronted him. His response, "It's frustrating avoiding someone I never cheated with." Really. This is my first time posting, so I hope this is all clear. Additionally, this will be lengthy because I need to address the entire list of coincidences. My 31 female, soon-to-be ex-husband, also 31 male, and I are currently in the process of getting a divorce. Our divorce is not at all related to the affair, but it certainly feels like a betrayal on his way out. I noticed that our relationship began to feel distant in early February and now it is April. I asked him if we were okay, to which he revealed a list of issues. I immediately went into problem-solving mode by suggesting therapy and trying to rectify some of the behaviors that bothered him. To be honest, I can be messy and am not the best at housework, but I made an effort to improve. About 2 weeks after our initial conversation, he told me that he was going out for a drink with coworkers after his shift. This was around 10 p.m. As a manager at a brewery, this was not uncommon for him. Around 11:00 p.m., I was still awake and feeling hungry, so I made a pizza and left it out for him, anticipating he would return within the hour. When I woke up around 2:45 a.m., my husband was not home. However, I received a text from him at 11:30 p.m. stating that he was on his way back. The pizza had been put away, but he still wasn't home. I also noticed that the pizza had been carelessly stored with pieces hanging out of the container, making it obvious that a drunk person had done it. He drove home drunk, ate pizza, drove back out drunk, continued drinking with whoever he was with, and then drove home drunk a third time. When I awoke, I called his friend Zach, who he claimed he was with that night. Zach had clearly been asleep and said he didn't know where my husband was. Wonderful. Eventually, he came home after 3 a.m. and told me he had been at the bar Sharky's with a group of people. The following day, I was mainly concerned about the drinking and driving, as this behavior was completely out of character for him. It was not just reckless, it was downright dangerous due to his driving while intoxicated on 3 separate occasions. My focus was on his safety, and I only confronted him about that. The next night, something compelled me to check his phone. We had been together for 12 years, married for 2, and I had never suspected infidelity, but I felt an instinctual nagging. While he was asleep, I looked through his phone and discovered messages from his female coworker, Callan, who is also married. I found it odd that she was messaging him on Facebook when she had his phone number. If she wanted to talk to him, why not simply text him? This seemed peculiar to me. She is about 10 years older than us, so I noted the distinct differences in how older generations communicate compared to millennials. One of her messages was sent at 1:30 a.m., and it read, "Hey, I actually went out and socialized tonight. You would be so proud of me." I found this strange. Why would she need a married man to feel proud of her? Shouldn't she seek that validation from her own husband? Why was she messaging a married man at 1:30 a.m.? Typing out the smiley face seemed flirty and intentional, especially given her age. I couldn't access any previous messages because their conversation had end-to-end encryption, a feature not present in the other messages in his inbox. It was intriguing. Once I discovered the message and realized she was flirting, I began asking questions the next day. Guess who he was out with that night when he returned home and then left again? Callan. First, he claimed it was a group outing without her, then it shifted to a group outing that included her, and finally he asserted it was just her and supposedly one other girl. His story kept changing as I probed, which is how I learned it was just her and perhaps one other girl. I then checked the closing hours for the bar where he said he had been, and remember, he arrived home after 3 a.m. Sharky's closes at 1:30 a.m., and anyone who works in bars knows that they issue last call 15 to 30 minutes prior to closing. So my guy, where were you? I admit I lost my temper and expressed my feelings. You are both married, this is disgusting and you both should feel ashamed, emphasizing the disgusting and ashamed parts. I was furious. I discovered that my husband had been unfaithful. Then I started piecing together all these events. I met Callan around 3 to 4 months ago. I thought we had a good rapport and shared some funny banter. I felt a sense of camaraderie, thinking I could be friends with another woman at the brewery. However, over the last month, I observed that she began to avoid me and make no eye contact when I entered the brewery. My husband had been there for 6 years. He manages it now. They catered our wedding food and beer, created a custom beer, and the entire staff was invited to our wedding. Everyone knows me and everyone acknowledges me, or at least offers a passing smile when I visit. It is a community, but suddenly Callan acted differently. In February, I hosted a floral pop-up at the brewery for Valentine's Day. As a florist, I was delighted when one of the women working there bought some flowers for her husband. So sweet. I hadn't met her yet, but I thought, awesome, another female friend at the brewery. That night, I added her and Callan on Facebook, realizing I wasn't friends with them on there. I am friends with the rest of the brewery staff and some customers who have become friends. Keep this in mind. This all happened on February 14th, 2 weeks after I asked my husband about our relationship and he acknowledged issues. Fast forward to the week after when I found out about him driving home drunk, staying out until 3 a.m. and discovering the messages. During my investigation, I also realized that Callan denied my friend request and changed her settings so that I couldn't add her. I had my best friend check her profile and there it was, the add button available for her to send a request. However, when I visited her profile, that button simply was not there. It was also not possible for me to cancel request, either. She changed the settings so that they only affected me, while she was willing to have my husband as a friend. So I went ahead and added her husband on Facebook, and he accepted my request immediately. I began to probe further into what was happening. He mentioned that they had started a Spotify blend playlist that included just the two of them for work. Now you cannot control what your Spotify algorithm places on this playlist. It includes various songs automatically. However, you can absolutely remove songs. One of the songs that showed up from her end was Red Wine Supernova, one of Chappell Roan's most sexually explicit songs. The lyrics include, "So baby, let's get freaky, let's get kinky, let's make this bed get squeaky." Excuse me, when he and I first started dating, we shared music and made mixtapes for one another. Sharing music can seem innocent, but I know how he connects with people through music and this crossed a line. He never did this with other women, so obviously this was not typical behavior for him. By the way, Chappell Roan's music is typically appreciated by the LGBTQ community. I mean, what married woman would leave such a song on a playlist for a man who is also her boss? I also noticed in a recent group photo from the brewery that he and Callan were standing next to each other. In a birthday shot video, they were also seen together. Perhaps this was coincidental, but in the context of everything else, it raised a red flag. 2 weeks later, during the last week of February, my husband asked me for a divorce. I was in the process of packing to move to my dad's house when I expressed my anger over him sneaking around as a married man with another married person. What did he reveal? Callan and her husband are actually separated. How convenient. Her husband relocated back east while we are in the Midwest. So when I initially found out she was messaging him and they were out until 3 a.m., I stated, "You both should feel ashamed since you are both married." He allowed me to assume she was still married when he already knew she was separated. He also claimed that she didn't tell him directly but mentioned it to another coworker and he overheard it. Come on now, whether she told you directly or not, she clearly wanted you to be aware that she was available. After we fully separated, I asked him for one favor in light of the divorce. I requested that he establish a boundary with the woman involved in the affair so that I could find closure. I asked him to delete her from social media, limit their interactions at work to strictly work-related matters, and cease hanging out with her or going for drinks after work. If there was truly no affair and she was not a significant person in his life, then what was the issue? I asked him to please prioritize my feelings over hers. I clarified that I was not demanding this, I was merely asking him to consider it. The next day, he agreed. He deleted her from social media, removed their Spotify playlist, and sent her a message through Facebook to establish boundaries, stating that she was an employee and he was her supervisor, so their conversations should be limited to work-related topics. Good progress. I admit I became somewhat vindictive after he sent her that message. I went to her husband's Facebook since he had accepted my request, and like the four most recent posts, he had her tagged in ensuring that she would wake up to the notifications from me liking photos of their shared moments. In response, she blocked me and had her husband remove me from his friends list. I cannot imagine what her explanation was for having him delete me, but I hope he is doing okay. On a side note, he had befriended another woman from a previous bartending job who was also in a relationship. However, there is a significant difference. They both mentioned their partners to each other and immediately introduced us for double dates. We all enjoyed each other's company and have remained friends. I even went on her bachelorette trip and we were invited to their wedding, which I did the floral arrangements for. They were also invited to our wedding, leading to a genuine friendship. I highlighted this example and asked him why, if he and Callan were merely friends and she was also married, he did not introduce us. Why did he treat her differently from the other mutual friend? What was the distinction between that friendship and the alleged friendship he had with Callan? He neither answered my question nor provided a satisfactory explanation, and I have since realized that he evaded the subject entirely. As of late, he has retracted all his admissions and now claims he did nothing wrong with her. He has expressed his frustration to me about having to avoid someone due to this situation, ironically, to me of all people. He said it was frustrating to avoid the woman he had an emotional affair with. I asked him how this situation created any dilemma for him. He provided a list. Working at beer festivals. Collaborating with other breweries. Going to live shows with coworkers. Company trips. Going to Lake Giacomo with Zach and other brewery employees. Let me break this down for you. Beer festivals, the entire company cannot attend these events. Only a few can go while the rest remain at the brewery. Since he is the manager, he can determine the scheduling. Therefore, he could easily send her to the festival while he stays back at the brewery, or vice versa. Collaboration with other breweries, the same exact situation applies. The front of house staff where she works isn't involved in the collaborations. It's the brewer who creates the beer and the brewery owners that take part in this. It does not affect either one of them or prevent them from participating. Going to shows with coworkers, when he made this statement, I immediately asked if he had been attending shows with her. This was an aspect I needed to include in my list of suspicious activities. However, he clarified that he had only ever gone with one particular coworker who no longer works there. So then what? That example has nothing to do with her and impacts nothing at all for him. Company trips, the brewery has only taken one company float trip, which was approximately 4 years ago. So that had zero impact on him as well. Lake Jacomo with Zach, I inquired whether she had ever gone to the lake with them before. He said no. So then how does this affect you? Every single example he provided regarding why it was frustrating to avoid her was based on hypothetical situations where he might encounter her and could have easily been avoided. I am incredibly frustrated because he initially confessed to having an emotional affair, but he is now claiming he did nothing wrong and was merely talking with a friend. He initially agreed to limit contact with her to work-related matters to help me find closure and to prevent me from constantly thinking about him working with the woman he had an affair with every day. Now, however, he is complaining that it is frustrating. What do you all think, affair or just a friend? Story 2. After 12 years together, I confronted my soon-to-be ex-husband about his late nights and found a flirty message from his coworker, Callan. You both should be ashamed, I yelled, only to learn she's separated. Now he acts like it's frustrating avoiding her, affair or just friends. This is my first time posting, so I hope this is all legible. Additionally, this will be a lengthy post because I need to address the entire list of coincidences. My soon-to-be ex-husband, who is also 31 years old, and I are currently in the process of getting a divorce. Our divorce is not at all related to the affair, but it certainly felt like a betrayal as he was leaving. I realized our relationship was feeling disconnected in early February. It is now April. I asked him if we were okay, to which he revealed a list of issues. I quickly switched into fix-it mode, offering therapy and attempting to amend some of the behaviors that bothered him. Honestly, I am messy and not the best at housework, but I started to improve. About 2 weeks after our initial conversation, he informed me that he was going out for drinks with coworkers after his shift. He told me this around 10:00 p.m. As a manager of a brewery, this is not uncommon for him. By 11:00 p.m., I was still awake and feeling hungry, so I made a pizza and intentionally left it out for him, thinking he would be home soon. I ended up waking up around 2:45 a.m. and my husband still had not returned. I received a text from him around 11:30 p.m. saying he was on his way home. However, the pizza had been put away and he was still not home. I also noticed that the pizza had been carelessly put away with pieces sticking out of the container, preventing the lid from closing. Clearly, a drunken person had done it, so he drove home drunk, ate pizza, left again while intoxicated, continued drinking with whoever he was with, and finally drove home drunk for a third time. When I woke up, I called his friend Zach, whom he had said he was going out with that night. Zach, clearly still asleep, said he had come home and didn't know where my husband was. Okay, well, great. He finally returned home after 3:00 a.m. and told me he had been at the bar Sharky's with a group of people. The next day, I was mostly upset about the drinking and driving. This behavior was uncharacteristic for him. It was absolutely reckless and dangerous since he drove intoxicated 3 separate times. My primary concern was his safety, so I focused my frustration on that. The following night, I am not sure what prompted me, but I looked through his phone while he was asleep. I found messages from his female coworker, Callan, who is also married, which I found rather strange. If she had his phone number, why was she using Facebook Messenger to communicate with him? That detail seemed irrelevant yet peculiar to me. Callan is about 10 years older than us, so imagine the difference between how boomers and millennials communicate. One of her messages, sent at 1:30 a.m., read, "Hey, I actually went out and socialized tonight. You would be so proud of me." Why does she need someone else's husband to feel proud? Shouldn't that validation come from her own husband? Why was she sending a message to a married man at 1:30 a.m.? Moreover, why was she specifically typing out a smiley face? To me, that felt flirty and intentional given her age. I could not view any prior messages because their conversation had end-to-end encryption, restricting my access solely to her messages, while the rest of his inbox did not have that restriction. Interesting. Once I discovered the message and realized this woman was flirtatiously reaching out, I began to ask questions the following day. Guess who he was out with that night before returning and going back out again? That's right, Callan. Initially, he claimed he was with a group of people but later changed his story to say she was there. Eventually, he stated it was just her and supposedly one other girl. His story shifted the more I probed, leading me to believe it was just the two of them. I later checked the closing hours for Sharky's and remember he arrived home after 3:00 a.m. Sharky's closes at 1:30 a.m., and anyone who works in bars knows they do last call 15 to 30 minutes before closing time. So where was he? I admit I lost my temper and exclaimed, "You're both married. What the heck? You are both disgusting and should be ashamed," emphasizing the words disgusting and ashamed to highlight my anger. I was furious to discover my husband had been unfaithful. After that, I began connecting all the dots. I had met Callan about 3 to 4 months prior. I believed we hit it off, enjoying a fun back-and-forth banter. I thought it was great to finally have a woman at the brewery I could be friends with. However, I noticed in the last month that she began to completely avoid me and refused to make any eye contact when I visited the brewery. Meanwhile, my husband had worked there for 6 years, managing it now. They catered the food and beer for our wedding, even creating a custom beer, and the entire staff was invited to the event. Everyone knows me and at least acknowledges my presence when I come in. However, Callan suddenly behaved differently towards me. In February, I hosted a floral pop-up at the brewery for Valentine's Day as I am a florist. Another woman who worked at the brewery came by and purchased flowers for her husband. It was adorable. I love when a man buys flowers. This woman was lovely and I hadn't previously met her, so I thought, awesome, another gal pal at the brewery. Later that evening, I added her and Callan on Facebook, realizing I wasn't friends with either of them. I am friends with everyone else from the brewery, including certain customers who have become friends. Remember this detail. This was on February 14. It was 2 weeks after I asked if my husband and I were okay, and he revealed that we were not. Fast forward to a week later when he drove home drunk, stayed out with her until 3:00 a.m. and I discovered the messages. As I was investigating further, I realized that not only did Callan deny my friend request, but she also changed her settings so that I could not add her again. I had my best friend check her profile and there it was, the add button was available for her to send a request. However, when I visited her profile, that button simply wasn't visible. I also couldn't cancel request. The button was entirely absent for me. She had tailored her settings specifically for me while still wanting to connect with my husband. Fine by me, so I added her husband on Facebook, and he accepted my request without hesitation. After noticing that, I probed my husband about what was happening, and he told me they had started a Spotify blend playlist together, just the two of them, for work. You cannot control what songs feed into this playlist. It uses your information and adds songs automatically. However, you can absolutely remove songs. One of the songs that was added from her side was one of Chappell Roan's most sexually explicit songs, Red Wine Supernova. The lyrics include, "So baby, let's get freaky, let's get kinky, let's make this bed get squeaky." Excuse me, when my husband and I first started dating, we shared music and made each other mix CDs. I understand that sharing music can be innocent, but I know that is how he flirts and builds a connection, so to me, this crossed a significant boundary. He never shared such music with other women, indicating it was not his usual behavior. Plus, Chappell's music is geared towards LGBTQ audiences. What married woman would leave that song on a playlist for her boss at a brewery? Additionally, I noticed in the most recent photo from the brewery, where a group of people were gathered, guess who was next to whom? Him and Callan. And who is next to him during his birthday shot video? Again, him and Callan. It could be a coincidence, but with everything else considered, it was hard to believe. 2 more weeks passed, and in the last week of February, my husband asked me for a divorce. At this point, I was packing and preparing to move to my father's house. I continued expressing how terrible it was for him to be sneaking around as a married man with another married person. He revealed that Callan and her husband were actually separated. Her husband left to return home to the East Coast while we are located in the Midwest. So when I initially found out she was messaging him and they were out until 3:00 a.m., I expressed outrage that they both should feel ashamed for being married. Meanwhile, he let me assume she was still married, even though he already knew that she and her husband were separated. He claimed she hadn't told him directly, but had informed another coworker and he just overheard it. To me, whether she told him directly or not, she was obviously speaking candidly enough for him to hear because she wanted him to know she was available. After fully separating, I asked him for one thing regarding the divorce. I requested that he set a boundary with the woman he had an affair with so I could achieve closure. I asked him to unfollow her on social media, only engage with her at work for work-related matters and stop going out for drinks with her. If there was no actual affair and she was not an important person in his life, what would be the issue? I asked him to prioritize my feelings over hers. I stressed that I wasn't demanding, merely requesting, and asked him to think it over for a day. The next day, he agreed and deleted her from social media, removed their Spotify playlist, and sent her a message on Facebook to establish boundaries, stating that as her boss, their interactions should only involve work-related topics. That was a relief. I admit I felt a bit petty after he sent that message, so I went to her husband's Facebook, remembering that he had accepted my request, and I liked the 4 most recent posts where he had tagged her. This ensured she would wake up to his message along with notifications that I had liked photos of her and her husband. She blocked me and had her husband remove me as a friend. I cannot imagine how she explained my actions to him, but I hope he is doing okay. Also, as a side note, he did become friends with another woman from a previous bartending job who was also in a relationship. The difference is that they both mentioned their partners to each other and immediately introduced us for double dates. We all got along famously and I adore her. I even attended her bachelorette trip. We were invited to their wedding, I arranged the flowers, and they were invited to ours, cementing our friendship. I brought up this example and asked him if he and Callan were merely friends. Why didn't he introduce us all? Why didn't he treat her the same way he treated our mutual friend? What distinguishes that friendship from the one he has with Callan? He didn't provide a satisfactory answer, simply evading the question, and as I write this, I realize I never received an answer. Recently, he has backtracked on all his admissions and claims he did nothing wrong with her. He even complained to me of all people that it's frustrating having to avoid her. Oh, I'm sorry, is it? Is it frustrating to have to avoid the woman with whom you had an emotional affair? Please allow me to offer my deepest sympathy. I asked how this presents any dilemma. He gave a list of reasons. 1. Working at beer festivals. 2. Collaborating with other breweries. 3. Attending live shows with coworkers. 4. Going on company trips. 5. Visiting Lake Giacomo with Zach and other brewery employees. Let me clarify each point. Beer festivals, the entire company cannot attend, only a few can go while the rest remain at the brewery. And he is the manager, so he controls the schedule. Send her to the festival or stay at the brewery, it's that simple. Collaborations with other breweries, the same principle applies. The front of the house where she works isn't even involved in that aspect. It involves the brewers and the owners, making this irrelevant to either of them. Going to shows with coworkers. When he mentioned this, I immediately asked if he had attended shows with her. I was unaware of that detail and saw it as another indication of his affair. However, he clarified that he only ever went with one guy who no longer works there. So again, this has nothing to do with her. Company trips. The brewery has organized only one company float trip in the last 4 years, so that has zero impact on him. Lake Giacomo with Zach. I asked if she had ever gone to the lake with them and he said no. So how does that contribute to your dilemma? Every single one of his examples of why it was frustrating to have to avoid Callan was unfounded. They were merely hypothetical situations where he might encounter her, and each of those could easily be avoided. I am incredibly frustrated because he initially admitted to having an emotional affair, but now he claims he did nothing wrong and that he was just talking with a friend. He originally agreed to avoid her except for work to help me achieve closure, so I wouldn't be constantly reminded of him working alongside the woman he had an affair with. Now, he is expressing to me how frustrating it is. What are your thoughts? Was it an affair or just a friendship?